So, welcome back to Without a Candle. I am Carly.
And I'm Carla.
So, today we wanted to kind of introduce ourselves to you guys on a little deeper level than just welcome to the shit show, right? This is what you can expect. So, Carla, you want to go first and talk about your spiritual path a little bit?
So I'll share as I can what I can. I was just explaining to Carla a little bit earlier times, even in conversation, not everything comes out in order, right? So I'm Carla. Let's see, how to word this. I am, like, I don't even know.
So start with your childhood. Like, when did you start feeling like some sense of like spirituality or something was different about you?
So that is different because I didn't know. I
Okay.
didn't know what any of this was, right? So fifth grade, I had this dream, a very playful, fun dream about two of my friends, and it occurred. This dream was set at school, and so these two individuals, one female, one male, they didn't really like each other very much.
Okay.
So in this dream, she was chasing him around social studies class, and she caught him and hugged him.
Okay.
And so that was it. Like, that was the innocent dream of a fifth grader.
Okay.
And then days later, guess what happened? It all played out
Really?
in history class just like that. So some people would have said that was like a deja vu moment.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, because I literally had the dream and then it happened. So wording is tricky. So did it happen because I had the dream, or did I have the dream because it was going to happen? Right. And I still go back and forth on wording on that sometimes too. And I know that can be confusing. And occasionally I also know that it sounds like I'm talking in riddles. Right.
Oh,
but I don't mean
yeah.
to, you know. So if something doesn't sit well with you in this moment, take time. If you want to jot it down and ask for clarification later, we have ways that you can do that. You know, you can ask in jot form or box up front. So anyway, I didn't know what these things were. They just happened. Yeah. And then one day, when there was a little aha moment, the best aha moment you can have at that age was not really clarification, but it happened to someone else and they mentioned it. So my mom had broken something in my room, and she said, I knew that was going to happen. I'm like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah.
And she said, I had a dream about it. So in that moment, I realized that I was not the only person
that experience.
Yes.
Do you remember how old you were?
So fifth grade, that makes us what, about 10, 11?
So those happen around the same time frame.
Yeah. Within.
Wow. How validating is that?
That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Probably
Validating.
But I still didn't wrap my head around that for years.
Yeah.
Years later.
Yeah. So did you have any other experiences, or like what made you realize what it was, or like what spirituality is, like how, like you just kept living?
Gosh, yeah, probably kind of took it away, right? And there was always glimmers. I don't know if that's the right word, but there was always little moments that would reflect back on and be like, what was that? Or what does that mean?
Yeah. Right.
And then maybe eventually I'll take time and jot some of those down. And so as things unravel, I can share some more of those stories.
Okay.
But really tuck things away.
Yeah.
Until high school.
Okay.
And then in high school, me and my cousin, and I'll keep names out of this, were sharing premonitions that lined up. So what does that mean? We were both having very similar premonitions.
Okay.
Mind blowing. But I didn't know that any of this had a name until we're talking like 2015, 2016.
Yeah. Like
and then
like almost decades later.
Absolutely. Well, I was raised Pentecostal.
Yeah.
And then I got married. Got married in 2003, right out of high school, basically. And so you kind of tuck all that away.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of time to entertain that.
No, because all of the traditional, like, life moments are happening there.
Yeah.
But then you had Logan, and you guys were traveling a lot with
all the things,
work.
Yeah. So kind of put on the back burner, and then I didn't unpack it much until later, probably closer to 2015. Is when I unpacked it again. I found a book I actually have in my hand, so if anybody wants information on that, The Kindle and the Crossroads. So in the title of this book, even before there was a shop, this really hit home to me. A book of Appalachian conjure and Southern root work. It's by Orion Foxwood. So this book was the piece, that made me aware that these were things, that these were practices, that these were pieces of a tradition, even though I wasn't taught it as a tradition. And man,
I'm sure it was like almost hitting a brick wall. Oh my God.
it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And I sat with this until about 2019. So 4 more years, I sit with this aha moment.
Before you actually start like
Anything.
doing anything.
Anything. Yep. And we'll come back to that a little bit later because there's a few pieces to plug in to make everything make sense, right? Yeah. There's always missing pieces.
Yeah.
But that's probably another episode or 10, right?
Yeah, we'll get there.
So what about you, Karlie? When did you realize that there was stuff and things?
So my parents did a really good job at introducing me, my sister, to many different religions, but not so much spirituality. I don't think that they were, even now, like they're not really aware of like that side, right? Because you can have spirituality and religion or spirituality without religion, right? So my parents did a really good job at teaching us about many different types of religious paths within Christianity. And none of it, like, I remember being so, like, little and none of it feeling right. Like, this sense of community, this sense of parts of the messages felt like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But then there was this lingering feeling of, like, but something's missing here. Does that make sense? Like,
Absolutely.
and I remember going through elementary school and middle school and into high school and my adulthood, like the whole up into my adulthood of just feeling like there's something more to this, right? And my life went on. I met my husband. I moved to Kentucky from Indiana and ended up becoming a hermit for a long time. I was here for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before I actually started getting out of the community. And my journey into spirituality really hits home. And by home, I mean here and you, because you introduced me like fully to it. Like, if we're being honest, like if it wasn't for you seeing my post about the adoption on Facebook, I would have never I've always loved rock. Like you know that we talked about that. Like I have always went out and like rock hunted. Like I was that kid. I was always picking stuff up. So me and my husband were looking for like rock stores, like stores that like sold crystals and stuff. And I had searched, around Savannah, and your place came up, but it was labeled yoga. So we never like came in. I had no idea that you sold any of this type of stuff. And then when you found that post about us fundraising for the adoption and you invited me in, I was like, okay. And I remember like walking into that space and just feeling the most like calm I have ever felt in my anxiety, because crippling anxiety was like so stupid. But from there it was like whatever I walked into was a vacuum I knew I was never going to come back out of.
And she hasn't left yet.
No, like I obviously. What is it going on, like 3-4 years?
I don't even know, because time and space doesn't make sense to me.
It feels like a lifetime.
It does. And then there's some days where I've been gone for a week and I come back and it feels like I've been gone for a lifetime too, right?
Yeah. So from there, right, you did exposure therapy at that point, and then it all just started to click and it all started to make sense. And me being who I am and wanting to know how everything works and ticks, and I got to research everything, and I do research everything. And from there, I started researching all the different types of paths within paganism and what that looks like. And from there, you taught me Reiki, and I'm a Reiki master now. From there, and exposure therapy with that, and like Reiki on myself and my clients, that's really enhanced my gifts as well. And like, I'm still learning those, obviously. But even like the sound bath we had on Saturday, new things coming to light with that.
It's always new. So I have a question for you then.
Yeah.
Because you have researched the paths, and I'm careful with wording because I don't particularly like labels and that kind of thing. But do you feel like you were looking for a name to call it?
In the very beginning, I was, because I was trying to make sense of the feeling, right? And within that, I did find a path that resonated with me, like, wholeheartedly. You know, that's another story for another day. But it's not something that I feel like has a, like, how do I want to say it?
This is tricky sometimes too,
Yeah.
because it's easy to see and it's easy to feel the things you want to share, but sometimes it's really tricky to articulate.
And that's my biggest
Same thing, same thing. We play charades with each other a lot, if I could talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes, like, I know what you're trying to say when you can't, and like vice versa. So like, we chime in for each other, and like, oh yeah, this is what she meant, and everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, I get it now.
And clarity too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not great with details and explaining all the things.
Yeah.
Because it's just in there, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I share this with people?
So within putting a label on something, even though I do have a specific path, it's not something that I let define, or like, I still feel like I'm pretty eclectic with my practices and what makes sense to me, because I base everything that I do off of just how I feel.
Intuitive.
Very
for those that don't.
Yeah.
Very intuitive.
Yeah. And that changes day to day, just based on, again, how I'm feeling, what I'm being told, the downloads I get that day. Like, I did a rune pull this morning before I left the house that told me that I need to remind myself of my growth. Yeah. And today that sat with me in a way that I need to be kind to myself and know that, hey, we're starting this new venture today, and I don't have to be perfect with that, and it's still growing and budding just like I am, and it's all gonna be as it is, how it needs to be.
And hopefully it helps that we set it up to that this is it. Wow, see, you can't talk. That this is unfiltered and it is real and it is live.
And we don't have to put any expectations on ourselves that aren't realistic in our everyday life.
Absolutely.
So
that's exhausting, guys. Like, I couldn't imagine coming in here and sitting
with a script
for 2 hours and like being careful not to say shit or, stuff, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate those out there. I mean, even if we're not your cup of tea, I appreciate you too.
Yeah.
But that allows the real, that allows the raw.
The candid conversations that just make sense as we pour and vomit everywhere. And
that's just fun. Let's just go with it, right? So now that you have a sense of home with your practice, what are some things that you'd like to share about your early experiences and when you realized that there was more to this than, I don't want to sound like I'm belittling anyone, but that there's more to this than the theatrics, because we talked about that. Yeah. That there's more to this than what you guys see on TikTok. That there's more to this than what you guys see in movies, Yeah.
So early on, when I was first introduced, it was all centered around like the sense of community and the sense of belonging. And that was something that I had to really sit with myself for a long time. And we've had those seasons of people come and go, and those feelings that come and go with it. And that was really hard for me to process, coming out of that hermit phase of my life. And now I'm being part of something bigger than myself, and being able to have these connections with people. One of the earliest lessons in this whole thing was understanding that spirituality is individual. Even though you have community, it is very intimate, and it doesn't have to be a whole thing, and you have to do everything with people all the time, and learning how to love yourself and be comfortable with yourself in your individuality. So that was a huge thing for me to learn. The other part of it was, as that was a huge defining moment, moving into that individuality. So learning my gifts as I practice, Reiki, learning with my room readings, and getting so familiar with myself that I have no more second doubts about my intuition and that gut feeling, and leaning into that and understanding that I'm not just making shit up. That was a huge one in the past couple months.
Yeah.
Literally understanding that, like, these downloads, and that was a realization too with when I was a child. I had such a vivid imagination, and like you were saying, how you would have dreams and they would happen, weeks, days later, I have this sense of just knowing. So when I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna happen, or yes, that song or whatever it is, and people would ask me, well, how'd you know that? It's like, well, I don't know. But to me, I thought I was just making that up. And now knowing that, no, that's literally your gift of like your guides and your spirit, like they're all telling you these things, giving you that knowledge. You just don't know where it's coming from. Well, now I know where it's coming from.
Kind of, sort of.
Yeah, like it still doesn't make sense, but it makes more sense.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
In a roundabout way. All of it makes sense, but it doesn't.
What
yeah.
can make sense today and what needs to make sense today makes sense today.
Yeah.
It's not all supposed to make sense right away. Could you imagine?
Oh God, no. The overload or like the overwhelm.
My brain would explode.
Gosh, no. So that was a pretty defining moment. And
So I mean, I can see some similarities there.
Yeah.
So you always had the things. You just didn't know that they were things, or that you didn't know what these things were called, or maybe did you think that you were the only one experiencing these things?
Based on my childhood, not really a sense of like feeling I was the only one, but having the sense of like I shouldn't share. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like, so that was not something that I ever brought to the forefront to anybody, and it wasn't until I learned about the clairsenses, because that's not something that's just taught in school,
Imagine if it was. Imagine if people knew their abilities.
Yeah.
Instead of us teaching our kids that they're fucking crazy, right? Yeah. Like maybe your child isn't hearing voices, or never mind. That's different. That's a whole different thing. Someone write that down, okay?
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't until I met you and started the journey and Miss Jerry too. She played a huge role in that at the very beginning of teaching me all the different modalities and those aha moments of, oh, okay. And then also feeling like I didn't even have them. Remember us having that conversation? I was thinking, yeah, I don't have any of that. And you're like, yeah, you do. And now
pay attention.
Yeah.
Right?
So with that, after you started learning all of this, what drew you into the path that you're on?
So realistically, after knowing that these were things, right, and that these things had names, and that other people experienced these things as well, it was just a constant desire to learn new things, right? And some of this, I felt like I was put on the path. I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Yeah.
But the whole shop started in 2019 with just soap and nothing of the spirituality sense tied in at all, except for the name, which evolved later, and I'll share that maybe later. So I was told by an elder, you are going to do Reiki. And so as you do, yes, ma'am. Okay. What the fuck is Reiki? Pardon my language, but what the fuck is Reiki? And I was told basically not to worry about it and to just do it.
Okay.
And so I started a whole new awareness, right? Divine timing. We should probably make sure we can use people's names and this stuff, since I'm going to now, and we can go back later or edit something out. So again, real conversation as we think ahead about things we didn't think ahead about before. So anyway, so Miss Jerry, she was that person.
Okay.
She was that person that's like, you need to do Reiki. And so I got online at Google and I'm like, okay, Reiki classes near me. And at that point, the only thing around was in Lexington. So the lady I sought out in Lexington, I did it based on her name. Okay. So her name and Miss Jerry's name, they had the same last name. Can't make that shit up, right? Because I'm just like, who to pick? So I went through her for Reiki 1 and Reiki 2. And then I don't even know how I met Jeff. It's like the first time. I don't know how I met Jeff. Anyway, I met Jeff, which is my Reiki master. So he came in, started teaching some Reiki classes, and I got my Reiki master teaching from him, teaching whatever, training, whatever come. And then here we are, right? And so the need to share that came quickly after. So that was when I was in the tiny space.
The first location.
And I got Reiki Master. Okay. Reiki Master when we moved to Main Street.
Okay.
So it's not even been that long ago.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
now, I mean, it feels like a lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot the question. Anyway, so that was so I was shoved on the path.
Yeah.
I was shoved on the path. I hope I didn't shove you that hard.
Well, I was just about to say,
Okay.
oh, the trend continues.
So that's the thing. Let's see. So after that, I didn't know at that time that Miss Jerry wasn't a Reiki master. She was level 1, level 2 practice. So once I got my Reiki master certification, I said, okay, now it's your turn.
Yeah.
Right. And so she got her Reiki master certificate as well.
No.
And man, I don't even know.
So how does that make you feel, almost having your path laid out for you, in a sense?
Well, I feel like it was more of someone came through and maybe cleared the brush.
Okay.
And everything else is kind of just, fell into place. Kind of like when you start landscaping. You gotta clean the slate and know that there's options. And then you start putting pieces together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I feel like when I was introduced to it, it was that you hit a wall, now stand up. Like, you had no time to react. Hit the wall, stand up, and I just went with it.
You did. Just leave my head.
Yeah, I just went with it. And it was so funny doing my research and like all the things, because my husband isn't religious. I've never known him to be religious up to this point. And one day I'm sitting in my backyard, the dogs are playing, and I'm reading my book, and he comes home from work and he asked me what I was reading, and I told him, and I was telling him it was about paganism for beginners. So I had a little bit about each path. And I was telling him about the path that I was really resonating with. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's how I was raised. And my mind just flowed. I was like, what do you mean? We've been together for 6 years. And I had no idea that that was a part of his childhood and his life and how he was raised. And now it's something that we joke about and I pick on his parents about. Like, come on, guys. I did all of this research myself and you were right in front of me this whole time. Like, so it was funny. To kind of have that aha moment and that nudge within, like, okay, that's why it felt like home, because I was home with it. You know what I mean?
A different level of acceptance. So not that you need acceptance, but for a moment that, like, I'm sure that felt good to know that, okay, this isn't something I'm going to have to educate on. This isn't something I'm going to have to convince someone else that this is okay.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, and I was really, not really so much afraid, because my husband's always been really accepting of all the crazy shit that I do. But
thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks. But it was almost like that sigh of relief of knowing that, like, it's already a part of us now. Yeah. Like, it's just natural. It can be done the way. And now, like, his practices are still very subtle compared to mine, but that's just who he is. Compared to me, I'm more.
Well, I feel like that fits in to the podcast name, Without a Candle.
Yeah.
Because he probably practices without all of the things, all the glory, right?
All the time, yeah. And that's individual practice for you right there. Yeah. So
I appreciate your verbiage on eclectic, because for a long time, even recently, people ask me, like, what are you?
Or what are you believing?
Yeah, and typically, what are you? Because, anyway, that's another day too.
Yeah.
So, and that I don't have to pick any one thing, and it's easy to forget that you don't have to pick one thing or one place or one whatever. And that's with other things, even in religion. Like, I know individuals that they don't have a home church, that they visit all the churches.
Oh, yeah.
So, in a sense, when it comes to practices, I feel free to be intuitive to choose all the practices if I want to.
Yeah, because there's a sense of appreciation with wanting to practice a little bit of everything, because there's such profound messages. There's profound feelings too, because sometimes one path feels completely different than the other path, and it just kind of, you ebb and flow with it.
And that's on any given day, because, something we say often when people ask us about energy work. Energy work is one of the hardest things to explain. It's not like getting a pedicure or manicure.
Yeah.
We are different every single day, and each client is different every single day.
Yeah, there's never one session that is the same.
I think the verbiage that I've used, and this came from someone in a passing conversation, this wasn't an original aha moment, was that no one, in this sense we were talking about religion, that no one religion had it right, but not any religion, no one religion had it wrong either.
Yeah.
And in that I found a term called omnist.
Okay.
If I'm saying that properly, we'll figure that out later. And it was just about the awareness of noticing, or there's a better word for that, but noticing that there's truths
in
every choose to see.
No, I love that. And I think that's why we kind of lean into the eclectic, you know, side more than anything.
Absolutely.
Especially when you come into the shop, like you don't have a sense of just one. We try to cater as best as we can.
Absolutely.
To all paths, regardless. And if there's something that we don't have here,
and even religion
try.
On that same note,
yeah,
we were a common stop for purple candles once upon a time.
Oh yeah,
and we have that was Catholicism needing those tools.
Oh,
we have tools for everybody.
Yeah, and if we don't, just let us know, and we will. Yeah. Like we don't know what we don't know until we know it.
And educating us on that, right? So. There's been a lot already discussed, and I'm super excited to continue to.
So I did want to ask one more, and like touch on one more topic, but within our journey and your journey, did you ever hit a like high point where you felt like, okay, this is exactly where I needed to be? And did you ever hit like a low point of, well, what the hell am I doing? Like none of it makes sense. Did that ever happen with you?
Almost every day.
Okay.
I mean, just to be honest with you, right? Yeah. So today's a high point, right? Like this is new, this is exciting.
Yeah.
In January, man, let's talk about getting through January and that weather and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't matter whether it's a high or low. There's always messages. There's always synchronicities. And it could be someone coming in just being thankful that we're here, that we're existing. And so sometimes that's the message, because this is hard. I mean, and I don't mean that to sound whiny, but small business isn't for the weak, right? And we both have families, we both have other things going on. So, and then
in your spirituality.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? So, yeah, because
I guess that all ties in. Spirituality plays a huge part in our everyday lives.
Because in those low points, if there hadn't been that messenger, and that's when you're talking about spirit guides or messengers, whoever's come in, if there hadn't been those messages of thanks and gratitude.
Yeah, that would definitely, I guess so. When we hit the low points in our human life, where spirit side comes in to really uplift and remind us of the high one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
Just keep swimming.
Just keep swimming.
That's probably going to minish her eventually.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that question. That's probably a question that we can jot down and
touch deeper
come back to later. Yeah.
Okay. So with getting to know us a little bit on our spiritual journeys and like how we got here, that leads us into the podcast and like why it's called Without a Candle.
Oh, we're going there now?
We are going there.
Yeah. That was fast, wasn't it?
So going right back to the eclectic side of what we do. It's really all about intention.
Absolutely.
We really preach intention and manifesting a lot. And I think there's great value.
There'll be a need for us to come back and even elaborate more on just those words, intention, and share what that means to us.
Yeah.
And manifestation as well.
Yeah. So what do you have to add to why we chose the name?
So I want to just mention that this goes back, this concept of not needing all the things goes back to Jeff when he was teaching the Reiki masterclass. So he had set the altar and gathered some things. And one of the things, and that we still have in the shop, is blue lotus. So he burned a charcoal and added some blue lotus. And in that, he mentioned that it could be for ritual, but realistically, some of it's just for theatrics, right? The smoke looks nice, the scent smells nice, but we really didn't need it. Yeah. So that was my first moment of like, oh, there are some things that we could do or that we could use, but we don't need.
Yeah.
And so that was different, Karlie, because the first Reiki class who I went to, she had all these things and all these tools. And so I hesitated about continuing because now I need to learn all these tools, right? And now I need to learn how to read oracle cards and tarot cards before I can do the Reiki practice.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. But in practice, it's important that I share, hopefully with you, I hope I'll share this enough with you, that you don't need anything.
Yeah. So
You are the tool.
Like if you pick out the herbs based on the intention, you pick out the stone based on the intention, and just having that visualization work of, I'm going to use, the obsidian for protection, or I'm going to use the cedar for whatever I picked it for, right? Because each thing has different, intentions, and you have to set intention with what you're using it for. And sometimes just knowing that that's what you're doing is enough.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, and without a candle, that is a simple way for us to remind everybody that within your spirituality, it doesn't have to be a whole theatrical thing. You are more than welcome to have your altar set up. Use the stone, use the herb, burn the shit, light the candle. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's just not.
So the concept too, because we often get asked, what do I need, right? And it's odd, the looks I get when I tell people they don't need anything, you know, here I am, we're a retail store, Karlie.
I know.
And then people are like, what do I need? And then we're turning around and teaching them that you need you. You need you, you need your intention, and that's it.
Yeah.
So Karlie, on that note, like if you had something that you needed to do or working, would you not do it because you didn't have your tools? So if you didn't have that sage, so
no,
I
I'm
feel
very flexible and like fluid with how I do. So for example, when I do my virtual room readings, I do have a full altar set up, but I feel like with that, it gives people a sense of comfort, right? There's a sense of comfort in having, my little statue of Freya invoking her, my two ravens invoking Odin's insight, But I can do a rune reading without it. You know what I mean? Like when I'm meditating, I can just close my eyes and visualize a candle burning. I don't need to actually burn the candle, when we're doing our Reiki session. We don't need the Palo Santo to do the symbols. We can just do the symbols. You know what I mean? And like you said, being a retail store for us to sell this, I think that's why people come back though, is we don't try to sell people on anything.
it's real.
It is very real, and we set the intention of like the people on the new path, right? And I feel like that's the biggest thing, is teaching the people in the beginning stages that you see all of this stuff on TikTok. You see all of this stuff in books and in shows and TV and movies and all the things, and they have all of the things, right? You don't have to have it. You don't have to have it. All of that is based on budget. It's based on personal preference. It's based on the person doing it and their path and in their individuality. And when you take yourself out of that because you're not a part of it, you start figuring out what is for you. And maybe, you do want to carry a stone in your pocket for the day. And that's okay. You can come in here and buy it, but you also don't have to.
Right. So I was sitting here trying to think about another way to explain this. So let's just say hypothetically, I am a medic of sorts, right? And then I'm going out into town or going to somewhere, and I don't have my bag. I don't have my first aid kit. But I cross someone's path that clearly needs taken care of. Am I going to not take care of them because I don't have a Band-Aid?
Yeah.
That make sense? I don't know how else to explain that. But it's about like you can stop, you can do the thing, you can take the time. You don't have to have all the tools. You'll figure that shit out. You'll figure it out. A medic's not going to let someone die in the streets because they don't have their exact thing they're waiting for.
Yeah, they'll do everything they can without it.
Absolutely.
And same thing within our work. We just after visualizing and setting the intention with knowing you want to use a tool is just enough. It's just enough. So keeping things simple and keeping spirituality simple in a world that makes
it's so not simple.
No, it's so not simple. It's one of those things that is so simple, it's complicated. did. And that's the point of the podcast, is to remind you that it's not so. With that being said, we hope that some of this resonated with you and you were able to take a little tidbit of something out of it and it made some sense in some way. And if it didn't, well, hopefully the next episode will.
Stay tuned
Yeah.
long enough and it will start connecting the
Yeah.
dots. Yeah.
I like that.
So that's it for today. Or I mean,
Yeah.
for now, I guess, Carly. So with that being said, we appreciate you. We love you. And we'll see you when we see you.
Bye, guys. Thanks.